So we'll probably get some more questions about transportation before we're done tonight, but let's move on to some other questions from our viewers. One of the neat things about this program, one of the great things about it, is we have an informed viewership, and they're willing to take a deep dive into government process. And so we have one viewer who wants to know whether or not there's going to be any effort to avoid or to minimize the use of omnibus bills, and that viewer is very concerned about that. And another viewer, this viewer from Jackson, is concerned about the House announcing 33 new committees and is wondering whether or not that's an efficient way to do business. So omnibus, House committees, general process questions, where does our panel think we're going? Let's start with you, Senator Kiffmeyer.
Well, wonderful. I think that when you have
even though you're in the Senate, you can express what you can criticize the House if you want. So.
Well, I served there for 2 terms for 4 years, so I guess I could have a foot in each one here. I think that I'm not concerned so much about the number of committees because committees are committees. I'm concerned about the work that we are doing. And sometimes more committees enables you to cross the paths of more people and be engaged. But I think the bigger issue for me, though, in the new House structure, which really is striking a negative chord, is the fact that you have a hyper committee, you might say the omnibus of committees, Ways and Means, where all the finance divisions are under the Ways and Means, and that the process is such that usually, as we're familiar with, you act on a bill in a committee, it goes to the Senate floor or the House floor, and then it's very open and transparent where the bill is moving and documented. In this case, because of the omnibus Ways and Means, now you have a situation where by memo alone, they are moving to committees and to Ways and Means, and people are very, very concerned, mostly about finding out where are things, how can I find them, how can I know, because the system is set up for noticing committees, and bills are going to be heard in committee. So that's really a big concern that we hear about. In regards to omnibuses in general on the topic of legislation, I absolutely support having more bills on a specific subject and not having the omnibus. There are times, like when you have a budget committee, you have to balance finances within a particular budget area. And because of that, the nature of that, that's a little bit, but when it comes to like policy things, to have more of a clear path and stay away from those large bills. I wish even last year we would have had more bills, more narrowly tailored. I think we'd all been served better, and we might even have had more signed by the governor in that situation. But those are my comments in regards to omnibus.
So, Representative Mariano, let's go to you because, of course, you're on Ways and Means, as I recall.
I am, yeah.
And so, tell us, give us your side of the story relative to the House structure and why you think it makes sense, and then talk also about the omnibus issue as well.
Sure, absolutely. Yeah, well, a few things. One is that the Ways and Means structure that the House Democrats put into, at this point, temporary rules will become permanent rules soon, is not a new approach. It's an approach that we've used in the past and we use to great effect. It's not a less transparent approach. Everything that moves is reported. It's reported on a timely basis. It's shared with the public. Our institution actually leads the country in terms of having a relationship with the public, in terms of being transparent, providing various tools, increasingly with online access for citizens to be able to track the movement of legislation. That will continue to be the case with the use of the Ways and Means structure that we've proposed. Quite frankly, one of the major reasons we proposed it is to avoid something that citizens are often express incredible frustration with, and that's the gridlock of debate that happens on our floor. So in other words, if everything moves to the floor, it opens up the possibility for mischief in terms of excessive argumentation, challenging for something that's simply about moving a bill from one committee to the other. This way, we're actually going to move bills efficiently on a timely basis where in those committees the public will have the ability to be engaged in a timely way, weighing in on those bills. So in terms of the number of committees, I guess with Senator Kiffmeyer, I'm not terribly concerned with the number. I think perhaps our staff is a little bit concerned because it does put a load on them. I think one way to think about this is that as our society continues to evolve and big issues surface, that sometimes we need to be able to tinker with the committee structure so that we can give the amount of time necessary for the issue that's most salient at that time. A really good example right now in my area is the creation of the Corrections Subcommittee, which my good friend Jack Considine, your state rep, is the chair. You all know that there were some real tragic, difficult issues, tragic outcomes with difficult issues in our corrections facilities with the loss of guards who were killed in the line of duty. That felt to us like we really needed to have a committee to specifically focus on the incredible complexity that our prison institutions face in terms of staffing, numbers, the quality of work, the stresses that all the residents of the institution face. So it's not unreasonable, in other words, to be able to add committees, and you know what? We can also move those committees out once we move on to some other issues. So I think, our effort really is about being efficient in control of the House and about a committee structure that really reflects the salient issues. Quickly on the omnibus bill, I suspect there's a strong consensus here that big major omnibus bills is not a good way to govern. Makes it pretty impossible for the public to really follow what's going on when everything is loaded up into one bill and just a small handful of people wind up making the decisions that are embedded in there. I mean, the bill, it's literally hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of pages long. So I am absolutely committed to making sure that our bills that move forward stay on point and provide easy access of information to the public.
Representative Schumacher, your thoughts on committee structures and all of that, and omnibus issues?
Well, I think that there is quite an appetite to try and do something different than the omnibus bill structure that's there. I'm a little concerned when the talking point is that we're not going to do omnibus bills, because then we're just changing the name on what is essentially an omnibus bill and still packing a lot of information or a lot of new language into a bill, but in the more traditional sense of how we understood omnibus bills to be before the previous legislative session. And so just concerned for that, but I think overall that more of our members would be interested in seeing something like that, and we would welcome the idea of not having as many omnibus bills out there. There are a lot of committees out there now, about a 50% increase, I think the number was, maybe 48% from where we're at, and so hopefully they're able to do more of a deep dive into some of these particular issues and really get into that. So we can do that. And as far as the structure goes, I like to be optimistic about things. I know this is a big change for a lot of us. I never served. I've been in for 9 years now. I've never served under a structure like this, and so it's new to me. So hopefully it takes some getting takes some getting used to in the process overall. But I think for a lot of us, we're just looking for some clear-cut explanation of what's going to be. And we kind of, in the minority, of course, you're going to look for those pieces in there that you can kind of scrutinize, and that's a lot of the role of the minority, is to scrutinize the things so we can end up with a better result in the end, come up with the things that didn't happen there. And so there's a lot of scenarios that we can put together based on how the rules are proposed now that we would just like to see addressed, and have the hypotheticals that we can come up with just to give a little assurance that that's not going to happen. We'd like to see that a little bit more concrete overall, that some of these things aren't going to happen, that a bill can't be memoed to one committee in the morning and another committee in the afternoon and another committee in the evening, and have that one bill go through, and the role of amendments and how those will play in, and just getting some stronger answers on that and how we are going to move forward. I know it's still early in the session. We don't have bills before us yet that have amendments and those sorts of things. So hopefully very soon we can start hearing more about that, and then we can move on to the actual issues and not the inside baseball stuff.
Senator Friends, very quickly.
Well, first of all, Representative, I'm giving you an A+ on the optimism scorecard. I really think we strive in the Senate. I'm new there, but there's a good working attitude, and I love the way you put that. And I also think for my friends in charge in the House, I'm willing to give the benefit of the doubt. I've not seen it work or fail, and we'll see. And the public will be the ones who eventually tell us how good or how bad the structure is. So good luck, everybody's watching. I would say one thing on the omnibus question, because I sit not too far from Senator Marty, who objects every 8 to 10 seconds on the single subject rule, which is enshrined in our Constitution.
Yeah.
And we have a reason to think the Constitution is important to follow for a lot of reasons. And this would be my best take.
He's been known to suggest that the court might take a view of this question too, so.
I see him suggesting it. I just don't see that particular litigation commencing, but that's a different show with a different viewer. The only thing I would offer is that obviously the larger an omnibus bill gets, the more likely it is that it presents challenges that the public really doesn't want us to be challenged by. So I hope we can all agree that the bill at the end of session at 990 pages didn't serve the public as well as it could have. But I would say this, and I thought I sensed some hesitation on saying no omnibus bills. I think that the service to the public is best when the single subject rule means you will have a transportation omnibus bill, you will have an agriculture omnibus bill, and we can debate those, and we can go to committee, we can debate on the floor. It's not going to be possible to have every single bill stand alone, go through all the committees, come to the floor, unless you want each legislative session to take about 17 months. And so in that spirit, I would say you'll know when the purpose of your bill is to put a single subject before the body. State government. That's a state government omnibus bill. That's a good thing. We cannot do it without having some of those bills put together. And the public looks and says, I see these provisions, that senator or representative voted yes or no, and it's on the board, and that's democracy if you ask me. And that's, I guess, my hope for this session is that in both chambers you'll see omnibus bills, but to the spirit, if not the letter, of single subject.